few days ago, I did a discussion with Sean at Anglican and Aesthetics, and I touched on this argument that's been popular lately, promoted by guys like Christian Wagner and others. Wagner seems to be sort of a ringleader of a sort of group that are really eager and excited about this argument. This basically says Sola Scriptura is impossible. It doesn't work because the inspiration of scriptures is completely unknowable. It has to be revealed in the same way that, for example, the Trinity is completely unknowable through reason and logic in the world and had to be revealed. And therefore, since in order to have divine faith, you need a supernatural material object, which would be God revealing that these texts are inspired. And because, according to this argument, supposedly, Sola Scriptura claims that the only material object that exists, that can exist under Sola Scriptura, is the text of Scripture itself and nothing else. That therefore, this disproves Sola Scriptura because God had to reveal this material object. The text is inspired, and that is not the text. Ipso facto, Sola Scriptura false. This doesn't work for a couple of reasons. The first reason, which they're not going to agree with, they're going to say I'm wrong about this, but the first reason is that the inspiration of Scripture is nothing like the Trinity. Why? Because the Trinity, apart from God revealing something in the world to us about the Trinity, which we could at least implicitly deduce that he's triune from, there's no possible way in which we could ever know that he's triune. However, inspiration is not something outside of the world. Inspiration is something God does inside of the world. The very fact that a text has been inspired already means that there is evidence in the world which points to the fact of inspiration, unless you want to have an extremely low view of Scripture and say that inspiration does absolutely nothing to the text that could ever in any way indicate that the text is inspired. I hope you don't want to say that. The reality is that the fact that God has worked supernaturally, intuitively, invisibly to inspire this text, very true, has left a profound imprint on the text, making it very unique, such that we can deduce virtually, implicitly, in the text itself, that it is inspired. So it doesn't have to be revealed. But let's say it did have to be revealed. Let's say I was wrong about that. Does that refute Sola Scriptura, that you need a material object outside of Scripture? Well, here, I don't know Wagner, and I think he's just drawing on Scheeben, but the only way I can plausibly wrap my mind around someone thinking that Sola Scriptura can kind of be pigeonholed into some sort of extremely precise definition that isn't just the church can err, Scripture's infallible from God, is like they must have been very, very, very deep in a specific Protestant confessionalism in order to come away with like, hey, look, we have this very precise definition of Sola Scriptura. But to think that Sola Scriptura is like that is to completely misunderstand Sola Scriptura. Because what does Sola Scriptura say about confessions of the church? They can err. So even if there was some isolated, precise, Reformed confession that talked about material objects, those are not infallible. Those are not definitional of Sola Scriptura. Sola Scriptura is this: the Scriptures are from God. The Scriptures are infallible. Everything in the church can possibly err. That's Sola Scriptura. And if your argument isn't disproving that, then you haven't disproved Sola Scriptura. Maybe you could say, among certain people who hold Sola Scriptura, they've defined it in an epistemic way relating to material objects that needs to be adjusted and nuanced in relation to this, supposition that inspiration had to be revealed. But you can't say that Sola Scriptura is false because of this, because your own argument doesn't even remotely imply that the church needs to be infallible. It doesn't. It doesn't remotely imply that Scripture is not infallible. It doesn't remotely imply that the church needs to be infallible. So the argument does not work.